I'm 73 years old now. My knees ache every time the weather changes, and I can't hike the way I used to. But there's one thing I've carried with me for over 40 years, something heavier than any physical burden, and I think it's time someone knew about it before I'm gone. What I'm about to tell you may sound impossible. I know that. I've gone over it in my mind thousands of times. This isn't a story about monsters or horror, even though that's how it begins. It's not about fear or danger, though there was plenty of both in those first moments. It's about the strangest, most unexpected friendship I've ever had, and how it changed everything I thought I knew about the world. That autumn, my life took a turn I never could have predicted. I was 28, single, working as a secretary during the week, and spending every weekend I could out in the wilderness. My coworkers thought I was odd, a young woman who preferred to spend her days off hiking alone instead of going to parties or social events. They couldn't understand the pull of the forest, the way it called to me like nothing else ever could. I'd been hiking since I was a child. My parents used to take us camping every summer. While my brothers and sisters complained about the bugs and the lack of TV, I loved it. The stillness, the way sound carried differently through the trees, the smell of pine and earth, the way the world somehow felt both bigger and simpler when you were out there alone with nature. By my 20s, I was traveling solo often. I studied maps, learned navigation, practiced survival skills. I wasn't reckless. I was cautious, prepared, and experienced. But the wilderness doesn't care about your experience. It can turn on you at any time. That October morning started out perfect. I still remember it clearly. The leaves had turned, painting the forest in brilliant shades of orange, gold, and deep red. The air was crisp in that way you only feel in fall, cold enough to see your breath but warm enough once you got moving. I drove to a remote area I'd never explored before, one of those places you find by following old logging roads until there's nothing left but trees. My map didn't even show where the trail began, and that was exactly why I wanted to go there. I liked finding untouched places where you could hike for hours without seeing another soul. No candy wrappers, no cigarette butts, no initials carved into bark, just nature, raw and unspoiled. I started hiking around 8 that morning. The trail was faint, probably made by deer rather than people. I followed it for the first few miles, then began to wander off, guided by instinct and compass, pushing deeper into the forest than I probably should have. But that's what I loved most, the feeling of being somewhere truly wild, where maybe no one had stood for years or ever. I stopped for lunch around noon, sitting on a fallen log, eating a sandwich and drinking from my canteen. The forest was alive with sound birds calling, wind moving through the branches, the distant trickle of water over rocks. I felt completely at peace, at home, in a way I never felt anywhere else. I should have paid more attention to the sky. I should have noticed the wind picking up, the drop in temperature. Mountain weather can turn in minutes. But I was lost in thought, caught up in the beauty around me, and didn't notice the dark clouds gathering until it was too late. The first drops began to fall when I was still at least 4 miles from my car, in unfamiliar terrain. The rain came fast and hard, the way it does in the mountains. Within minutes, the trail turned to mud. The leaves that had looked like golden carpets a moment before became slick and treacherous. I tried to move carefully, testing each step, grabbing branches for balance, but the slope was steep and footing poor. I was descending a sharp incline, both hands gripping a sturdy branch, when my foot slipped. It happened so fast, 1 second I was steady, the next my foot twisted out from under me. I fell hard, twisting as I went down, and felt something snap in my ankle. The pain was instant and brutal. I heard a sickening crack. Then I was on the ground, gasping, trying not to scream. For a long moment I just lay there, rain pounding down, trying to make sense of what had happened. When I finally tried to stand, putting weight on my ankle, the pain exploded so sharply my vision went black. I nearly passed out right there. I lowered myself back to the ground, breathing hard, fighting panic. My hands shook as I unlaced my boot. My ankle was already swollen and turning purple. I knew immediately it wasn't just a sprain, it was broken, or at least badly fractured. I sat there in the rain, breathing through the pain, trying to think clearly. The sun was sinking lower in the sky. I checked my watch and was startled to see it was past 4 o'clock. I'd been hiking for hours without realizing it. The temperature was dropping fast, and the rain had soaked me through. I was at least 4 miles from my car, maybe 5, considering the winding route I'd taken, and I couldn't walk. This was bad. Really, really bad. For a few minutes, I let myself feel the fear. I was alone, injured, miles from help, daylight fading, and the temperature falling. No one knew exactly where I was. I'd told my roommate I was going hiking, but I hadn't said where. I could die out here. That was a real possibility. People die in these woods every year, but I couldn't just sit there and give up. I had to try. I had to move. So I grabbed a nearby tree and hauled myself upright, gasping from the pain. I tried putting weight on my ankle again, hoping maybe it would hurt less once I was standing. It didn't. Every time I tried to take a step, the pain shot up my leg like lightning, so intense it made me dizzy. I found a thick branch on the ground, heavy enough to use as a walking stick, and began the slow, painful process of moving through the forest. I could barely crawl faster than a snail's pace. Every step felt like torture. Every few feet, I had to stop, lean against a tree, and catch my breath before forcing myself forward again. The rain kept falling, the light kept fading. I was shivering now, soaked to the bone, exhausted from pain and cold. I had maybe covered a quarter of a mile when I heard a scream echoing through the trees. Long, high-pitched, and unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It froze me where I stood and sent every hair on the back of my neck straight up. My first thought was a mountain lion. I'd listened to recordings of their screams before hiking, and they can sound eerily human, almost like a woman's scream. But this was different, deeper, stronger. It vibrated in my chest. I gripped the branch tighter, heart pounding, eyes darting through the darkening forest. Then it came again closer this time. Something out there was making that sound, and it was moving toward me. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. I tried to move faster, but my ankle wouldn't allow it. I was stranded, hurt, helpless, and something dangerous was closing in. The branch in my hands would be useless against a mountain lion, but it was all I had. Then I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, crunching through brush and wet leaves. Not the light padded steps of a cat. This was something bigger, something that didn't care if it was heard. The footsteps came from behind me, each one louder, closer. I turned, clutching the branch with both hands, squinting through the rain and the fading light. That's when I saw it through the trees, maybe 50 feet away. A massive black shape moving between the trunks. It was huge, at least 8 feet tall, maybe more, covered in dark brown hair matted by the rain. For a split second, my mind tried to make sense of it. Bear, it told me. It has to be a bear. But bears don't walk upright like that. Bears don't have shoulders, proportions, or silhouettes like that. The creature stepped into a small clearing, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. It was shaped like a man, but far larger, much larger. Broader shoulders, longer arms, standing on 2 legs, its entire body covered in thick, tangled fur dripping with water. Its face was shadowed by rain and fading light, but I could still see its eyes. They were fixed on me. I screamed at it. I don't even remember what I said. Something like, "Get back," or "Stay away." My voice shook so hard it barely came out as sound. I raised the branch like it would somehow protect me from something that could easily tear me apart. But it didn't run. That was what terrified me the most. A bear would have bolted. A mountain lion would have vanished into the brush. But this thing, this impossible thing, just stood there, watching me. Then it started to move toward me. Slowly, cautiously, not aggressive, just curious. I stumbled backward, shouting, clutching the branch with both hands. My heel caught on something, a fallen log or root, and I went down hard, flat on my back. The impact knocked the wind out of me. The branch flew from my hands. I shut my eyes, gasping, waiting for claws, for teeth, for pain, for the end. I heard it approach. Heavy footsteps, then silence right beside me. I felt its breath on my face, hot and strong. The smell was overpowering. Wet fur, damp earth, and something raw and wild, something that had never known soap or civilization. I couldn't keep my eyes closed. I had to see. I had to know what was about to happen. I opened them. The creature was crouched beside me, its enormous frame hunched, its face just 2 feet from mine. In the dim, misty light, I could finally see its features. Its face was broader than a human's, the skull shaped differently, covered in shorter hair that revealed the structure beneath. Its nose was flat and wide, its brow heavy and pronounced. But the eyes, those eyes were what stopped my heart. They were dark, deep brown, almost black, yet there was something in them, awareness, intelligence. It wasn't looking at me like a predator looks at prey. It was looking at me the way one person looks at another. And then it did something I never could have expected, something that changed everything. It slowly, carefully extended one enormous hand toward me, palm up. The gesture was unmistakable. It was offering to help me stand. This impossible creature, something that shouldn't even exist, was reaching out to me. I stared at that hand for what felt like forever, though it was probably only a few seconds. Every instinct in my body screamed at me. Run, fight, do something. Anything but take that hand. But I couldn't run. My ankle was broken. I couldn't fight. Whatever this thing was, it could kill me in seconds if it wanted to. And yet, there was something in its eyes, something in the gentle way it moved, that told me maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to be afraid. My hand trembled as I reached out. Its hand was massive, at least twice the size of mine. The fur was coarse and damp from the rain, and its palm felt tough, like thick leather. I grasped it, or rather, it closed its long fingers gently around my forearm, and with effortless strength it pulled me to my feet as if I weighed nothing at all. The sheer power of it was staggering. There was no strain, no aggression, just a smooth, fluid motion, and I was standing again. Before I could even test whether I could bear weight on my ankle, the creature made its decision. It slipped one arm beneath my knees, the other behind my back, and lifted me off the ground. I was too shocked to resist, too overwhelmed to even think about struggling. It held me close, adjusting its grip carefully to keep me steady, then began walking through the forest. I should have been terrified. A part of me was, but another part, one that surprised me, recognized how gentle it was. It moved with such care, avoiding branches and uneven ground so I wouldn't be jostled. Its massive arms held me securely, but not too tight. It wasn't carrying me like prey. It was carrying me like something precious, something that needed to be protected. We traveled for what felt like 20, maybe 30 minutes. The rain had mostly stopped, just a soft drizzle now. The creature moved quietly, despite its size, weaving through the forest like it knew every tree, every rock, every hidden obstacle. It didn't stumble once. It didn't hesitate. It knew this place in a way I never could, even after years of hiking. I watched its face as we moved, the slope of its forehead, the shape of its jaw, the way its eyes constantly scanned the forest ahead. It breathed steadily, calmly, as though carrying me cost it no effort at all. Once, a low branch hung across our path. It didn't even slow down. It simply ducked, tightening its hold on me to make sure my head wouldn't hit it. Finally, we reached a rocky outcrop. Beyond a cluster of large stones, half hidden beneath a thick curtain of foliage, I saw a cave entrance. The creature ducked down, still carrying me, and stepped inside. That was the first time I saw the place that would become one of the most important locations of my entire life. The cave was astonishingly clean. I don't know what I'd expected: bones, debris, a wild animal's lair, but not this. A thick bedding of dried grass and leaves lined one wall, dense and soft-looking. In the center of the floor, stones had been arranged into a perfect circle, clearly a fire pit. The walls were smooth, the floor mostly level. It was dry, sheltered, and somehow safe. The creature carried me to the bedding and laid me down gently, as if I were made of glass. Then it knelt beside me, those dark eyes studying my face before glancing down at my swollen ankle. I'd already removed my boot earlier, and now the injury was fully exposed, bruised, purple, badly swollen. The creature examined it with surprising tenderness. Its massive fingers traced the injury delicately, and I gasped in pain. It looked up at me, and I swear I saw concern in its expression. Then it stood and disappeared into the darkness at the back of the cave. I sat there, breathing hard, trying to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be. Things like this didn't exist. Everyone knew that. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever name you chose, was just a legend, a story people told. But the pain in my ankle was real. The grass beneath my hands was real, and that giant creature was real too because it came back. It emerged from the shadows carrying large green leaves, broad ones, the kind that grow near water, and a handful of mud mixed with something fibrous, maybe crushed plants. It knelt beside me again and began wrapping my ankle with the leaves. The mixture felt cool against my burning, swollen skin, and almost immediately the pain began to ease. It worked carefully, moving slowly and precisely, binding the leaves in place with long vines, creating something that resembled a crude splint or bandage. When it finished, it looked up at me. I nodded, trying to show I understood that I was grateful. It made a low, rumbling sound that echoed softly through the cave. Not threatening, not angry. Something else, perhaps satisfaction or even joy. Then, it stood and walked out of the cave entirely. I sat there for a few minutes, listening to the rain outside, still trying to convince myself this was real. Then it returned, carrying more things: berries, roots, and 3 fish. Fresh fish, probably from a nearby stream. It laid them out in front of me like an offering, as if presenting a meal. I picked up the berries and ate them gratefully. They were wild black raspberries, sweet and tart, bursting with juice. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since lunch, and it felt like a lifetime ago, but I just stared at the fish. I was starving, desperately hungry, but not quite enough to eat them raw. Not yet. I tried to communicate what I wanted. I gathered a few small twigs from the cave floor, the driest I could find, and started demonstrating. The creature tilted its head, curious. I rubbed the sticks together, trying to create friction, to illustrate the idea of fire. It took forever. My hands still trembled from the cold, from fear, from pain. The wood was damp, but I kept going, working harder, more desperately. Finally, after what felt like ages, a small ember appeared. I bent close, blowing gently, feeding it bits of dry grass from the bedding, until a tiny flame flickered to life. The creature leaned in so close I could feel its breath on my neck, watching every movement. It seemed completely fascinated, entranced by the fire's glow. I got the sense it had never seen fire before, never understood how it was made. I carefully moved the small flame to the circle of stones, added more wood, and slowly built up a modest fire. The warmth was heavenly. I hadn't realized how cold I was, soaked, shivering, and exhausted. The creature kept watching, its eyes reflecting the firelight, glancing back and forth between the flames and my face. I placed one of the fish on a flat rock near the fire, close enough to cook, but not so close that it would burn. As the fish began to sizzle, the smell filled the cave, rich and comforting, and my stomach growled again. The creature's nostrils flared as it inhaled the scent. It leaned closer to the fire, studying how the heat changed the color of the fish, how it worked. When the fish was ready, I lifted it carefully, using another stick as a makeshift utensil. It was hot, almost too hot to touch, but I managed to split it in half. I kept one piece and held the other out toward the creature. It leaned forward, sniffing the cooked fish cautiously, then looked up at me, almost as if asking permission or reassurance. I nodded, miming the act of eating to show it was safe. The creature took a small bite, chewing slowly, thoughtfully. Its expression shifted, its eyes widened slightly. Then, with surprising speed, it ate the rest, letting out a series of quiet sounds as it did. When it finished, it made that same low rumbling noise again, this time louder. The sound was full of satisfaction, almost pleasure. It looked at me, and I smiled. Despite everything, despite the pain, the fear, the sheer impossibility of it all, I smiled. This strange, impossible being had saved my life, and now we were sharing a meal together. Then it pointed to itself and made a sound, a low, deep vocalization. Maybe it was a name, maybe just a noise of contentment, but it felt deliberate, as though it was trying to tell me something, trying to communicate. The warmth of the fire, the food in my stomach, the exhaustion from the day, all of it hit me at once. My eyelids grew heavy. I tried to stay awake, tried to remain alert, but my body had reached its limit. The last thing I remember before sleep claimed me was seeing the creature sitting near the cave's entrance, its silhouette outlined against the fading light like a guardian watching over me. I woke to sunlight filtering into the cave. For a blissful moment, I forgot where I was. I thought I was in my own bed, on an ordinary weekend morning. Then, the pain in my ankle reminded me, and everything came rushing back. The fall, the storm, the creature. I sat up quickly, my heart pounding. The creature was awake too, sitting cross-legged beside the remains of the fire, eating berries from a small pile. When it saw me move, it scooped up another handful and leaned forward, offering them to me. I took them, still half in disbelief that any of this was real. Slowly, I ate the berries, watching it. In the morning light, I could see it far more clearly. The hair covering its body varied in length, longer on its arms and back, shorter on its face and hands. Its face was astonishingly expressive. Its eyes were alert, intelligent, constantly shifting as it observed everything around us. When it caught me staring, it didn't seem bothered. It just looked back, curious. My ankle still throbbed, a deep, dull ache, but the swelling had gone down noticeably. Whatever that mixture of plants and mud had been, it had worked. The creature clearly knew what it was doing. I carefully tested my weight, bracing against the cave wall. It hurt, but not nearly as bad as before. I figured I could probably walk if I had some help. Maybe I could make it back to my car, if I could find the way. The creature seemed to understand that I needed to leave. It stood, gestured toward the cave entrance, and before I could even try to walk, it bent down and lifted me again gently, but firmly, as if determined to carry me itself. And honestly, I was grateful. Even if I had been stronger, I doubted I could have made it on my own. We stepped out of the cave into a brilliant morning. The rain had stopped, the sun was shining, and the forest looked washed clean, renewed. Drops of water clung to every leaf, glittering like tiny diamonds. The creature paused for a moment, adjusting its grip, then started walking. I had no idea where we were or which direction we were heading, but it moved with certainty, as if it knew exactly where to go. We traveled through the forest for what must have been over an hour. I watched the scenery glide past, trying to memorize landmarks, though everything looked different from this height. From this perspective, held securely in the arms of something that shouldn't exist. As we moved, I found myself studying its face again. In the daylight, I could see even more the texture of its hair, the lines of its brow, the calm, focused expression that never once seemed threatening. The hair on its face was shorter than the rest of its body, revealing surprisingly expressive features. Its brow would furrow as it moved across rough terrain, as if concentrating. Its eyes constantly swept through the forest, alert to every sound and shadow. Its lips pressed together when pushing through dense undergrowth, careful not to let a branch snap back and hit me. There was an undeniable intelligence there. This wasn't just an animal with a clever mind, like a dolphin or a chimpanzee. It was something different, something that could reason, plan, understand cause and effect in complex ways. It had saved me, sheltered me, fed me, and treated my wound. Those weren't instinctive behaviors. They were choices. Eventually, we reached a trail. I recognized the main path I'd meant to take before wandering off, getting lost, and getting hurt. The creature walked straight to the edge of the trail, then gently, carefully set me down. I tested my ankle, making sure I could stand on my own. It stayed beside me, watching, ready to steady me if I fell. When I was sure I could hold my weight, I turned to face it, not knowing what to say. How do you thank someone for saving your life? What words could possibly be enough? I tried anyway. My voice shook as I whispered, "Thank you." Again and again, knowing it probably couldn't understand the words, but hoping it might understand the tone, the emotion behind them. My throat tightened with tears. I tried not to cry. The creature looked at me for a long moment. Then it raised one enormous hand and waved. A clear, unmistakable wave goodbye, the kind you give to a friend. It held my gaze for one more second, then turned and walked back into the forest. I watched as it disappeared into the trees, fading into shadow until it was gone. It moved so quietly, so fluidly. It was like watching smoke drift away like it had never been there at all. I stood there for several minutes, staring at the place where it vanished, trying to process everything that had happened. Then I turned and began the slow, painful journey back to my car. Every step hurt, but I hardly noticed. My mind was filled with the memory of what had just occurred. The creature, the cave, the gentle care it had shown me, the intelligence in its eyes. the feeling of being carried through the forest like something precious. When I finally reached my car, I sat behind the wheel for a long time before starting the engine. My hands were shaking. I was exhausted, sore, covered in mud, still damp from the rain. But I felt changed. It was as if I had crossed some invisible boundary, seen something I was never meant to see, learned something that rewrote everything I thought I knew about the world. I drove home over the next few days, barely aware of the road beneath me. When I finally arrived, my roommate took one look at me and insisted on driving me to the hospital. I told her I had slipped and injured my ankle, which was true. I just left out everything that came after. The doctor said it was a severe sprain, maybe a hairline fracture. He gave me crutches, painkillers, and told me to rest for a few weeks. I nodded, but I barely heard him. My mind was still in that cave with the creature's face illuminated by firelight, with those dark, intelligent eyes watching me drift to sleep. I told no one what really happened. Who would believe me? They'd think I was insane. They'd say I hit my head, that I was delirious from pain, fear, and cold. So I kept it to myself, locked it away as something too strange, too precious to share. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. About the creature, about the depth in its eyes, the gentleness in its touch, about how it saved me when it could have easily done the opposite. It could have ignored me, let me die alone out there. Instead, it chose mercy. I kept the dried leaves it had used to wrap my ankle, tucked away in a drawer. Every now and then, I'd find them again and run my fingers over them, proof that it was all real, that I hadn't imagined it. I tried to draw it, again and again, desperate to capture its shape, its eyes, that expression, but no sketch ever came close. Nothing I put on paper could convey what I saw. Weeks passed. My ankle healed. The pain faded from sharp to dull, then to the occasional twinge. I went back to work, back to the routines of everyday life, but nothing felt the same. I'd sit at my desk, sorting letters, typing reports, and my mind would wander back to that cave, that night by the fire, that moment when the creature reached out its hand to help me. I told myself to forget it, to move on, return to normal life. It was a once-in-a-lifetime encounter, something that happened and ended. The creature was probably long gone, moved on to another part of the forest, another territory. It had helped me, and that was the end of it. But I couldn't let it go. The memory haunted me, an itch I couldn't scratch, a question I couldn't answer. Some nights, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, remembering those dark eyes and wondering, did it remember me too? Did it ever think about that night, about the human it saved? Would I ever see it again? I started researching, spending hours in libraries, reading everything I could find about mysterious creatures, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and the countless unexplained encounters people claim to have had in the woods. And every time I turned a page, every time I read someone else's account, I felt a strange sense of comfort, like maybe I wasn't alone after all. Most of the stories I read were clearly exaggerated or completely made up, but a few felt real. The details matched what I had seen, the intelligence, the gentleness, the way it avoided people. As soon as my ankle had fully healed, as soon as I could walk without pain, I knew what I had to do. I had to go back. I had to try to find it again. I needed to know if it was real, if the connection I felt was real, or if I had imagined everything in my pain and fear. So, I returned to that same trail on a clear Saturday morning in late November. The trees were bare now, the forest settling into winter. Everything looked different without the fiery colors of fall, starker, colder, more exposed. I hiked past the spot where I'd fallen, and seeing it in daylight made me realize just how lucky I'd been. The slope was steeper than I remembered, the terrain more dangerous. I pushed deeper into the woods, trying to retrace the route the creature had taken while carrying me. But everything looked different in daylight. And back then, I'd been half delirious, barely aware of my surroundings. At first, the whole thing felt absurd. What was I doing? Searching for something everyone said didn't exist? But I kept going. I began to call out, unsure what else to do. My voice echoed through the empty forest, bouncing off trees and stone. I called out, "Hello," then louder, "It's me, the one you helped." I felt ridiculous. My words vanished into the cold air. Still, I called again and again. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower in the sky. Nothing unusual happened, only the ordinary sounds of the forest. Birds, wind, the occasional rustle of small animals in the brush. By late afternoon, disappointment set in. I started to think I'd wasted my time, that maybe I had built something in my mind that wasn't real, that it had been just a single, fleeting encounter. Nothing more. Then I saw a movement, a flicker in the trees to my left, a flash of motion, something large slipping between the branches. My heart leapt into my throat. I ran toward it, shouting, pushing through brush and tangled limbs, but it was gone. I searched frantically, scanning the ground for tracks, broken branches, any sign at all. There was nothing. I stood there panting, unsure if I'd truly seen something, or if my mind was playing tricks on me, showing me what I wanted to see. The disappointment hit hard. I had been so sure, so hopeful. I decided to look for the cave instead. That, at least, was real solid, immovable. It wouldn't have disappeared into the trees. But the forest was endless repetition, one ridge, one gully, blending into the next. I lost my bearings twice, doubled back, wandered in circles. The sun was sinking low now, the light turning golden, then amber. Finally, I recognized something, a distinct formation of 3 boulders leaning together. I'd seen them from the cave's entrance. I was close. I pushed through a wall of thick vegetation that had grown over since my last visit, and there it was, the entrance. I ducked inside, letting my eyes adjust to the dimness. The bedding of dried grass was still there, though wilted and brittle. The ring of stones still marked the fire pit, blackened with soot and faint traces of ash. Everything was real. All of it had been real. I sat down on the remaining patch of grass and waited. I didn't know if the creature still used the cave or if it ever would again, but I had nowhere else to go, so I waited. Outside, the light began to fade. The colors of the forest shifted from gold to orange to violet, then to deep blue. The air grew colder, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. I was just about ready to give up, to admit that this had all been foolish, when I heard it. Heavy footsteps, moving quickly through the undergrowth outside. My heart began to pound again, this time from hope. Then the creature appeared at the cave entrance. But something was different. It didn't look the same as before. Its posture was tense, its expression dark. When it saw me, it didn't pause in calm recognition. It bared its teeth. Massive, sharp canines glinted in the dim light, and I realized with a cold rush of fear that I had never noticed them before. It made a sound I'd never heard before, somewhere between a growl and a roar. The entire posture of its body was hostile, threatening. It looked fierce, dangerous. This wasn't the gentle creature that had once saved me. This was something that could kill me in seconds. I screamed and threw my hands up, pressing myself against the cave wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. The creature stopped abruptly, no more than 10 feet away. It stared at me, head tilted to one side, and slowly, its aggression began to fade. I could see confusion in its expression, as if it were trying to understand what it was seeing. Then, I saw it happen the exact moment it recognized me. Its entire body relaxed. The bared teeth disappeared. It made a new sound, lower, questioning, almost uncertain. It wasn't angry anymore. It was puzzled, maybe even curious. Relief flooded through me so fast it left me dizzy. It remembered me. It knew who I was. This wasn't just a random encounter, not just a wild animal that once happened to help a lost hiker. It remembered. I had come prepared this time with a backpack full of food and small items I thought might interest it, or at least help it understand. I sat down carefully, making sure my movements were slow and calm. Then I began taking things out, one at a time, showing them to the creature like I was explaining a secret to a child. A sandwich wrapped in plastic, a piece of cheese, a shiny red apple, a packet of crackers. Each time I held something out, it crouched down to examine it. It took each item gently from my hands, sniffing deeply, turning it over in its massive fingers. The sandwich fascinated it, the soft texture unlike anything found in the wild. The cheese made it wrinkle its nose, but it still tried a tiny bite. The apple, though, that was the winner. It bit into it, eyes widening with surprise, then quickly devoured the entire thing, core, stem, and all making a low, pleased sound between bites. Something that almost sounded like hello. Then I pulled out something I hadn't even planned to use, paper and colored pencils. I'm not sure what made me think of it. maybe instinct, maybe hope. I drew a simple stick figure on the paper, then handed one of the pencils to the creature. At first, it held it awkwardly. The small tool looked absurdly tiny in those enormous hands. It looked at the pencil, then at me, then at the paper, clearly trying to figure out what I wanted. So I drew another shape, slowly, showing how the pencil made marks, how pictures appeared from nothing. The creature leaned close, so close I could feel its warm breath on my arm, watching every movement. Then, carefully, it began to make marks of its own. At first, they were just random lines, too much pressure, then too little. But it learned fast. Within minutes, it was adjusting its grip, controlling the strokes. And then, a shape began to emerge. Crude, uneven, but unmistakable. Two figures, one large and one small, standing side by side. It had drawn us. I felt my throat tighten. Tears blurred my vision. This wasn't just an intelligent animal reacting to stimuli. This was something that thought, something that could understand abstract ideas, connection, companionship, and express them through symbols. It wasn't just mimicking me, it was communicating. It understood what I was doing here. It understood why I had come back. A warmth spread through me, something I didn't have a name for. Awe, gratitude, maybe the beginning of something deeper. A bond that went beyond species. Something that existed outside the limits of language. That second visit was the first of many. From then on, I returned whenever I could, every few weeks, whenever time and weather allowed. And every time I went back, it was waiting. Sometimes the creature was already there when I arrived, sitting at the cave entrance as if waiting for me. Other times I had to wait for hours before it appeared, emerging from the forest like a shadow slowly taking shape. Eventually I began to understand its rhythm. It seemed to roam across a vast territory, but returned to the cave regularly, as if it were its home base. Each time, I brought something new. Picture books with bright illustrations, thinking the colors might fascinate it. Pieces of fabric in different textures, silk, wool, cotton. Simple tools, a small mirror, a comb. Always food, different kinds, each visit, to see what it liked best. It always seemed excited to see me, greeting me with that low, rumbling sound I'd come to recognize as friendly. Its entire body language radiated welcome. Over time, I began teaching it more about fire, different ways to start one, the materials needed, how to control heat and flame. The creature was a patient student, practicing again and again until it could create a steady fire on its own. It was astonishing to watch it learn, to see that spark of understanding flicker in its intelligent eyes when a new concept clicked into place. But it taught me things too. It showed me which plants in the forest were edible and which were poisonous, which leaves had healing properties, which roots could be eaten raw, which berries were safe. It would take my hand and lead me through the woods, pointing out different plants and making distinctive sounds for each. I began to learn its language, or at least a small part of it. I started recognizing patterns in its calls and tones, learning what certain sounds meant. I watched how it moved through the forest and tried to imitate it. Despite its size, it moved in near silence, each step instinctively finding solid ground, its body flowing through the underbrush without disturbing a branch. It left almost no trace of its passage. When I tried to copy it, I was clumsy and loud by comparison. But I got better over time. The creature was endlessly fascinated by my belongings, especially anything technological. Once, it spent an entire hour examining a flashlight. It kept clicking it on and off, staring into the beam as if it were some kind of magic. It shone the light on the cave walls, on its hands, even on my face, utterly enthralled by this tool that created light without fire. When the batteries finally died, it looked so disappointed that I made a note to bring extras next time. I taught it simple games, tic-tac-toe drawn in the dirt with sticks, pattern-matching exercises, even rock, paper, scissors. It took a while to understand the rules, but once it did, it seemed to love the challenge. There was a playfulness in it, a sense of humor. Sometimes it would make deliberately silly gestures or exaggerated faces, just to see how I'd react, teasing me like a mischievous child who knew exactly what it was doing. Some visits stood out more than others, moments that revealed just how deep our connection had become. One spring morning, I arrived to find that the creature had gathered a small collection of objects near the cave entrance. Smooth river stones of different colors, chunks of quartz that sparkled in the light, Rocks with strange, swirling patterns, and even a few fossilized shells. They were arranged neatly, almost artistically, like a display. When it saw me notice them, it made excited sounds, gesturing toward the stones and then toward me. It took me a moment to understand. These were gifts. It had gathered them for me. It had thought of me when I wasn't there, collected things it believed I might find beautiful or interesting, and waited to show me. The realization stunned me. This wasn't just habit or curiosity about a human. This was affection. It cared about me. It thought about me when I was gone. It wanted to make me happy. I started crying, overwhelmed by the tenderness of the gesture, by the emotional intelligence it revealed. The creature seemed alarmed. It stepped closer, gently touching my face with one massive finger, worry etched across its features, as if afraid it had done something wrong. I smiled through my tears, trying to show it that I wasn't sad, that these were tears of joy. I picked up one of the crystals, held it up to the light, and made a delighted sound, expressing gratitude as best I could. The creature relaxed, letting out a pleased rumble, clearly overjoyed that its gift had been received so warmly. Another visit brought a very different kind of moment, one that showed me how aware it was of danger. I was walking toward the cave one warm summer afternoon, calm and careless, when the creature suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It grabbed me and yanked me backward behind a large tree, one hand covering my mouth before I could make a sound. I was startled and a little frightened until it pointed. Through the trees about 40 feet away, a massive black bear was lumbering along the same path I had been walking. It was huge, probably a male, and heading straight toward us. We stayed hidden behind the tree, the creature's arm wrapped protectively around me until the bear finally moved on, disappearing into the forest. It had seen the danger long before I did. It had protected me. That level of awareness, that instinct to shield me, said everything. I wasn't just a curiosity to it anymore. I was someone it cared about, someone worth protecting. When November came and the temperatures began to drop, I started to worry. I had been visiting for nearly a year through spring, summer, and fall, but winters in the mountains were brutal. Temperatures could plunge below freezing, and the snow could pile up feet deep. How could it possibly survive? At the beginning of December, I came prepared. I brought a thick wool blanket, an authentic Hudson Bay blanket I had bought just for this purpose. It had cost more than I should have spent, but I didn't care. When I showed it to the creature, it looked puzzled at first, unsure what the fabric was for, but when I wrapped it around its shoulders, when it felt the warmth, its entire expression changed. It let out a joyful rumble, pulling the blanket tighter around itself, rubbing its face against the soft wool. Then it looked at me with such unmistakable gratitude and delight that my heart nearly burst. And then, in a gesture that caught me completely off guard, it opened the blanket and pulled me inside too, wrapping us both in its warmth. We sat like that for a long while, huddled together, and I felt safer and more content than I had in months. Inside the cave, I noticed how carefully it had prepared for winter. There were stores of food neatly stacked along the back wall: nuts, dried berries, roots, even strips of dried fish, enough to last for months if necessary. It had gathered extra grass and leaves for bedding, making the floor thicker, warmer, and better insulated. On one visit in mid-December, I brought a thermos of hot soup. The creature sniffed it suspiciously at first, steam rising in the cold air. It didn't seem to understand the concept of something warm and liquid. But when I poured a little into the lid and offered it, it tasted the broth carefully and its eyes widened in surprise and delight. It drank slowly, savoring each sip, humming softly between mouthfuls. When the soup was gone, it examined the empty thermos with fascination, turning it over and over in its huge hands as if it were some kind of treasure. Visiting in winter became more difficult for me. The trails were icy and dangerous. Snow made every step a struggle, and the cold bit through my clothes. But I kept coming at least once a month, often more. And every time, the creature was waiting. Somehow, it always knew I would return, no matter the weather. Sometimes I'd find it had already cleared the snow from the cave entrance, gathered extra firewood, and prepared everything for my arrival. One early spring visit stands out in my memory. I'd brought a small hand mirror the kind women carry in their purses. I'd been thinking about the creature's self-awareness, wondering if it knew what it looked like, if it had ever seen its own reflection. When I held up the mirror for it to see, it flinched, eyes wide with shock. Then, slowly, It leaned forward, studying the image more closely. It touched its face, then the mirror, then me. Its expression was pure, bewildered amazement. I pointed to the reflection, then to the creature, trying to show that what it was seeing was itself. It stared for a long time, tilting its head from side to side, watching the reflection move. It touched its nose, its brow, its teeth tracing the features as it looked into the mirror. After that day, I noticed it had started grooming itself more carefully. It would clean its face, pick bits of debris from its fur, smooth the hair on its head. The mirror had given it something new, a kind of self-recognition. It was like watching someone discover vanity or perhaps simply themselves. Years passed, and one spring I had another accident. Nothing as serious as that first one, but bad enough. I slipped on a damp trail where ice still lingered under the leaves and fell hard on my shoulder. It wasn't broken, but badly bruised and painful. I was sitting at the base of a tree, grimacing every time I tried to move my arm when the creature appeared. It must have been nearby. Maybe it had heard me fall or heard me cry out. It approached carefully, and when it saw me clutching my shoulder, I caught a spark of recognition in its eyes. It examined the injury gently, those massive fingers soft and deliberate, and I could see it thinking, remembering. Then it turned and vanished into the forest without a sound. I waited, uncertain, my breath fogging in the cool air. 15 minutes later, it returned, carrying the same kind of leaves and crushed plants it had used on my ankle so many years before. The same mixture from the night we met. After all that time, after hundreds of lessons, countless plants, it still remembered exactly what it had used to heal me. It hadn't forgotten. It treated my shoulder the same way it had my ankle, applying the cool paste and wrapping it gently with leaves and vines. The soothing chill dulled the pain almost immediately. When it finished, it helped me to my feet, letting me lean on it as we made our slow way back to the cave. Now we were saving each other. The circle had completed itself. I had taught it about fire, tools, and pieces of the human world. It had taught me about the forest, about survival, presence, and how to belong. We had protected each other, cared for each other, healed each other. We were truly friends. Our visits had become almost ritual steady, sacred in their simplicity. The most important part was always the shared meal. I brought the food. We cooked together over the fire and ate side by side in comfortable silence. By then, the creature had learned to prepare simple dishes on its own. It could clean and cook fish, roast roots and nuts, even make a kind of flatbread from ground seeds and water. It was proud of its cooking, and it showed. It would arrange the meal neatly on flat stones, setting the food before me with a look of genuine joy, as though serving a feast. Those shared meals became my favorite part of every visit, quiet moments of peace and connection. There was something profoundly satisfying about sitting beside that extraordinary being, eating together in the glow of the fire, sharing warmth and silence instead of words. In those moments, the world felt smaller, kinder, whole again. All we ever really needed was presence, connection, the simple act of breaking bread together. Sometimes we ate while watching the sunset bleed through the trees. Sometimes we shared our meal inside the cave while the rain whispered against the rocks. Other times we ate quickly and sat by the fire afterward, and I would try to teach it new words, or it would show me new plants it had discovered. But we always ate together. We always shared food, space, and time. Over the years, its drawing skills had grown astonishingly. What began as crude stick figures became detailed, graceful, and expressive. It practiced constantly. Sometimes when I arrived, I found new sketches traced into the dirt outside the cave. Studies of trees, stones, and animals. Scenes that showed its growing sense of depth and motion. It had learned how to capture the feeling of wind, the curve of a falling leaf, the rhythm of movement. Its drawings weren't just depictions anymore. They were art, emotional, intentional, and full of life. Then, one autumn afternoon, I discovered something extraordinary. The cave walls were covered in drawings. Using charcoal, it had created a sprawling mural across the stone. A sequence of images that told a story. Our story? The first meeting. A small figure on the ground, and a towering figure standing above. The journey to the cave. A large shape carrying a smaller one through sketched trees. Learning fire. Two silhouettes crouched over a flickering flame, sharing food. The same two figures sitting side by side, a meal between them. Watching sunsets, the two of us drawn against a round orange sundae. It was a timeline of friendship, carved in soot and memory, a record of moments that had meant enough to preserve. Moments we both remembered. Moments that had mattered so deeply to it that it wanted them to last beyond either of us. I stood there for a long time, staring at those drawings, overwhelmed. This wasn't just an intelligent creature. This was a being that thought, remembered, reflected, and created. It could look back on our time together and find meaning in it. It could recall specific moments and give them form. It could express emotion through art. The creature stood beside me, watching my reaction. When I turned to it with tears in my eyes, it reached out and gently touched my face, the same tender gesture it always used when I cried. I smiled through my tears, trying to show it how deeply moved I was, how much the drawings meant, how grateful I was that our friendship had meant enough to be remembered this way. In the 5th spring of our visits, I discovered it was no longer alone. There was another one in the cave, a smaller, younger creature, perhaps 8 feet tall instead of 9, leaner, with fur a lighter shade of brown, more like cocoa than dark chocolate. When I arrived, they were at the back of the cave. I stopped at the entrance, not wanting to intrude or frighten the younger one. My old friend rumbled a soft greeting and motioned for me to come closer, but the younger creature pressed itself against the wall, wary and unsure. I watched as my friend began to demonstrate how to build a fire, arranging the kindling carefully, striking sparks with practiced ease, how to clean fish, handle food gently, and move without threat or haste. The younger one watched every motion, its eyes wide with concentration. It was learning. It was curious about me, too, but cautious, peeking around my friend's massive frame and making small, questioning sounds. I set down the food I'd brought near the fire and stepped back, giving them space. The younger one needed to feel safe, to learn that humans, at least this one, were not a danger. I couldn't rush that. Before leaving that day, I lingered for a while, watching the two of them together. My friend was teaching the next generation not just how to survive, but how to trust, how to believe that a bond could exist between us. I felt a deep sense of awe and purpose. The knowledge wouldn't die with my friend. It would be carried on, passed down. And maybe one day, the younger one would have an encounter of its own, a connection of its own. Maybe this fragile understanding between our kinds would continue in some small way. I can't explain how I knew, but something told me that this last trip late in the fall would be different. Perhaps it was because I was in my 60s now, and though still strong and active, I could feel time catching up with me. The hikes took longer. I rested more often. My knees ached in the cold. I had saved something for the right moment, and this felt like the right one. I brought a locket, a small silver pendant on a chain. Inside was a photograph. It was me, from the time we first met 30 years ago. My hair darker and longer, my face younger, unlined, but it was still me. I opened the locket and showed it to the creature. It studied the photo carefully, running one massive fingertip over the tiny image. Then it looked at me back and forth, from the photo to my face, again and again. And I could see the understanding dawn. It realized that the picture was me, but younger. That time had passed, that I had changed, that I was aging. It stared at me for a long moment, and something in its eyes made my throat tighten. Maybe it was sadness, maybe understanding, maybe acceptance of what neither of us could change. We were both growing old. Our time together would not last forever. Then it rose and disappeared into the back of the cave, moving with purpose. When it returned, it carried something wrapped carefully in broad green leaves, tied with thin vines. It held it out to me solemnly, making soft, deliberate sounds, tones that carried meaning, weight, intention. I took the bundle and slowly began to unwrap it. Inside the bundle was a stone perfectly smooth, shaped and polished by water over countless years. It fit in the palm of my hand, oval, blue-gray, streaked with natural lines and grooves that almost resembled a face, as though someone had carved faint features into it, though I knew it was only the work of time and chance. The coincidence of erosion had created something that looked deliberate. It was beautiful in its simplicity, and I knew instantly that the creature had carried it with it for a long time, waiting for the right moment to give it to me. Maybe for years, maybe since the day we became friends. It had kept it safe until now, until it mattered most. I looked up at the creature through tear-filled eyes. It reached out and brushed a single tear from my cheek with one careful fingertip. I pressed the stone to my chest, then held it up to show that I understood that I knew what it meant, how precious it was. I found a cord in my pack, threaded the stone onto it, and placed it around my neck. The creature rumbled softly, joyfully, and touched the stone where it rested against my heart, pleased, perhaps, that I would carry a piece of it with me always. I'm wearing that stone right now as I tell you this story. I've worn it every day for 12 years. It's warm against my skin, smooth from constant touch. Sometimes I hold it and remember those dark, intelligent eyes, that gentle touch, that feeling of connection that shattered everything I thought I knew about this world. I'm 73 now. If the creature is still alive, it must be unimaginably old by human standards. Yet the last time I saw it, 6 months ago, it looked strong, healthy, timeless almost. Maybe they age differently. Maybe they live longer. Maybe time treats them more kindly than it does us. I don't know. There's so much I still don't know. I can't hike as often anymore. My knees won't allow it. What once took me 2 hours now takes 4, with breaks to catch my breath, to rest, to ease the ache in my joints. The trail that once felt like a peaceful walk now feels like a mountain to climb. But 6 months ago, I made the journey again, knowing deep down it might be the last time. When I arrived, the creature was resting inside the cave, lying on the same bed of grass we had shared and tended together through the years. It looked up as I entered, and those eyes, those deep, dark, knowing eyes I had first seen more than 40 years ago, met mine once more. Recognition, welcome, and something else, something like peace. I sat beside it and took its massive hand in both of mine. Our hands had touched hundreds of times over the years, but this time felt different, heavier, more final. We sat in silence for hours, just holding hands, simply being together in the space we had built through decades of visits and quiet understanding. I spoke to it. I said everything I had ever wanted to say. I told it how much its friendship meant to me, how it had changed my life, how it had shown me that the world was still full of wonder and mystery, that intelligence and emotion exist in forms we never imagined. That connection, true connection, can cross any boundary if both sides meet it with openness and respect. I told it about the fear I'd felt that first night, and how that fear had turned into trust, and that trust into friendship, and then into something deeper still, something words can't touch. I told it how those dark eyes had haunted me from the beginning, how they had called me back again and again to the forest. I told it that, of everyone I'd known, of every bond I'd ever formed, this friendship, this impossible, improbable friendship was the most meaningful, the most transformative, the most real of them all. The creature listened, eyes fixed on my face. It couldn't understand most of the words, but I believe it understood everything that mattered. The tone, the love, the gratitude. When I finally stopped speaking, when there was nothing left to say, it reached out and touched my face one last time. That touch held everything. Goodbye. Thank you. And I understand. I nodded, and I felt the same. All of it contained in one simple, gentle gesture. That day, I made my slow descent down the mountain, stopping often not just to rest, but to look back, to try to memorize every detail of the place that had meant so much to me. I never went back to the cave after that. I couldn't. I just started walking. And when the cave finally slipped out of sight, I didn't turn around. Looking back would have broken me. So now, here I sit, an old woman in her living room, telling you about the most meaningful relationship of my life. I know how it sounds. I know what people will think, that I'm mistaken, delusional, senile, maybe even lying. But the stone around my neck is real. The memory is real. And so was he. I'm telling you anyway because this story deserves to be known, because I won't be here much longer to tell it again, and because someone should know the truth about what has lived in those mountains. That friendship taught me more about kindness, patience, and genuine connection than any relationship I've ever had. It taught me that intelligence, emotion, and awareness are not uniquely human, that we are not as special or as separate as we like to believe, that there are beings in this world who can think, feel, love, and create in ways we can barely imagine, creatures with rich inner lives, their own forms of expression, and their own deep capacities for communication. People will want to know where to find it. They'll ask for coordinates, specific locations, verifiable proof. They'll want to go themselves, to see with their own eyes, to collect evidence. But I won't tell them. I can't. I won't betray my friend. There are people who would harm it if they could. Some would capture it, study it, lock it in a cage or a lab. Some would hunt it for sport or display it as a trophy. Some would turn it into a media spectacle, destroying its quiet life in those mountains. Some would exploit it for money, fame, or the banner of scientific progress, never seeing the being inside the body, never recognizing the consciousness, the feelings, the personhood. Some things should be hidden. Some wonders should be protected. Some secrets deserve to be kept, even if keeping them costs you credibility. Even if sharing them might bring you recognition, proof, validation. My friend deserves to live in peace, to exist in those mountains without fear of discovery or harm. This place dies with me. That is the price of understanding the responsibility I took on when I chose to return to that cave so many years ago, when I chose friendship over evidence, connection over recognition. Tell the story if you wish. Share it. Pass it on. Let others wonder, question, and imagine. But protect what matters. Protect the wild places. Protect the mysteries. Protect the possibility that somewhere out there, impossible friendships are still being forged, that others are being shown what I was shown. The world needs wonder. It needs mystery. It needs to remember that we have not discovered everything, that surprises still wait for us. This is my gift to you, the story of my impossible friend. Keep it carefully. Share wisely. Guard what must be guarded. And perhaps, just perhaps, look at the world with a little more wonder, a little more openness, a little more willingness to accept that reality is stranger and more beautiful than we ever imagined. I befriended a Yeti, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. For more stories, look here.